In this module, we're going to take a look at how we can change the transparent tables that we created earlier on in the course. It's important you know how to do this and the implications of adding and taking away fields to the underlying data in your database table. So as a reminder, let's take a look at the table we created called Z Employees. So in the SAP GUI, we can choose transaction SE11, or under the Tools menu, ABAP Workbench, and then Development, you've got the ABAP Dictionary transaction there, in case you forget the transaction code. So here it's already entered the table name for me. I'll choose Display, and we can see the 6 fields that we entered to create our table. Remember, Mandant is the client field that is automatically maintained by the system. And then we have Employee, which is our employee number, our surname, forename, title, and date of birth. Now it's important to realize that whenever you want to change a database table, you run the risk of losing data, especially when you're affecting the key fields in your table. The database system itself will try and determine if you can make adjustments by deleting and creating new items which change the underlying database catalog, or whether you have to re-implement what you have already defined. Quite often with large tables, you have to manage the manipulation of the data yourself, so as to be sure that you don't lose the data. When your tasks involve just deleting fields, it's quite a simple task, but depending on the table structure and the contents, this also has certain complications. So before you start any of these database change tasks, it's a good idea to mitigate against as many risks as possible and start by using a copy of your database table. This will allow you to test out any change activities you want to make without the risk of affecting the original table and the underlying data. Now, when you copy a database table, you only copy the table structure itself. This means just the table properties, the fields, not the actual data. So let's have a look how we can copy our table. So we will step back to our initial SE11 screen. We already have our table name, Z Employees, which we will copy. And all we need to do is go to the copy button, which is Ctrl F5, and decide on a table name that we want to copy to. So let's be very original and stick a number 2 on the end. Click the green tick for the OK. Then as normal, we'll be asked for a development class. And as in the last modules, what we will choose is local object. That's all there is to it. You've now got a copy of the table. So we have Z Employees 2 in our database table there. We can choose Display, and we can see an exact copy of the original table. Now, one thing to note is that even though we've copied the table, we can't use it yet, because if you have a look at the status, it says new. We need to activate our program. So we'll click the Change button, and then we'll click the Activate button. Now remember, our table uses data elements which use data domains that we've already set up in the previous module. So all of those objects are already active. And when we activate our table, all it needs to do is just activate the table itself, no other objects behind it. So now we can take a look at the table. And if you remember, I said all we do is copy the table structure, not the contents. So if we look at the table contents, we can see that we've got no records in the table. So what we will do now is enter some records into our table so that later on, when we try and add fields and take fields away, we will see various warning signs coming up from the system to tell us we may be about to delete data and it'll be unrecoverable. So let's go ahead and just choose we'll step back. Then we'll choose the Utilities menu, Table Contents, and Create Entries. So now you should be familiar with this screen. We can just create a number of employees. Super original. Let's do the drop down box for the date of birth. Just so I get the format correct. And save our record. Okay, so now we've entered 3 records, and that should be enough to then allow us to change the database and see what effects it has on the data. So just to make sure everything's been entered correctly, we'll just choose the Contents view and click Number of Entries. We have 3, and we can execute and have a look at the contents. So let's step back. We'll go to the Table Design, and what we're going to do is add a brand new field, and we'll make it a non-key field. And this is the same process that we went through when we added fields originally. So let's have a field called Initials. Remember to use the Z, and remember this is a brand new data element. So I will double click and use forward navigation to generate it. And for the domain, let's see if there's an existing one called car3, and there is. Character field length 3. So we can use that one. There are our field labels. We'll activate that data element. Local objects. There we go, that data element's now active. So now when we step back to the table, we can see it's brought through the field title and the actual data type of the field. Let's add another field, this time called Gender. And no prizes to guess what we're going to call the data element. We can see the data element doesn't exist, so forward navigation, yes to save the table, yes to create the data element. We'll give it a name and just copy it to the clipboard for when we do the field label. And here we'll just make it character 01. And we can see it already exists, which is fine. Activate the object, then we'll step back and we have the field. Let's have another one called Salary. Z Salary. Double click. You know the drill. Now this one is going to be a currency field because it's a salary. So what we're going to do is choose a currency field called CURR9. I think that exists. Yeah, there we go. And this is a currency field. We can see it's got a length of 9 with 2 decimal places. You can create your own or search in the data dictionary and use a different one if you like, but I know this one exists and I've used it before. Go to field label, Local object, activate it, and step back. Now, one important thing with the salary field is, because it's a currency, we actually need to include a separate currency field that is attached to the salary to indicate what currency the salary is in. So I'm from the UK, so this for me would be GBP, Great British Pounds. If you're in the US, it'd be US dollars. So to do that, let's create a brand new. I'll tell you what we'll do. First of all, I'll show you the error message. If we try and activate the table without a corresponding currency field. Here we go, errors occurred. Let's have a look. So what this is saying is we need a reference field, a reference table to hold the type of currency. So let's step back and do that. Let's call it e-currency. And the actual data elements, we will use one that already exists. Because currency fields, there should be no need to create your own because they should already exist in the system. And I know there's one called CURCY. I'll use that and press enter. And there we can see it's a currency key field with a length of 5. Now that's all well and good, but what we need to do next is tell the system that our salary field is going to reference our currency field. So this brings us on to this currency tab. And when we flick to it, we can see that because we are using a field type currency, this field is now available for us to fill in. And what we will do is enter our currency field in there, and we just need to put our table name in here. So we're going to say this currency key field is a reference field for our salary field. So now we can activate the table and everything is good. Let's have a look at what this actually does. Let's go and enter another record or change an existing one and see what options we have for entering our salary and currency. So again, go to Utilities, do Create Entries. Let's add a new record. Put in the surname and the full name. And some initials. Gender female. We'll have a salary of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we enter the currency key. Now at the moment, you'll see there's no drop down or anything like that. So you don't really know what we need to put in this currency key field. For now, I will put GBP because I know that's going to be a proper entry. But what we'll do is save the record. Then we'll go back to the design of our table and we'll build in some error checking to ensure that we do enter correct currency values in this field. And also what would be useful is on the gender. Let's do an example where we can introduce a drop-down box so we can only choose 2 values, male and female. I'll choose save and step back and we'll do just that. So to enable us to build in error checking, we need to use what are called foreign keys. And we'll use foreign keys to ensure the user can only enter valid values. So what we'll do is use some forward navigation and we'll take a look at the value table used for our currency field. So we'll double click and under the Data Types tab we can see this data element refers to a standard SAP delivered domain, WAERS. Let's take a look at this domain. So we use forward navigation again, and we can see it's of type currency key, number of characters 5. Now if we go to the value range tab and look down at the bottom, we can see we have a value table. We have covered the value range tab before when we created our table, but as a reminder, we can use a value table to determine the entries we can make in the field within our table that is based on this domain. So let's use some forward navigation to look at this table. Here we can see what the table is made up of. We've got 6 fields. We've got the standard client, currency key, a currency code, and then some other fields. Let's take a browse at the actual data. And if we scroll down, here we go. So this record right here, that's the value I entered into our table, GBP. So I know it's going to be valid, but we can make use of this check table, or this value range table, to ensure we allow the user to only pick values from this table. So let's step back. And we'll step back again. And now we're back to our table. So what we need to do is go back to our Fields tab, highlight our currency field, and then we're going to define a foreign key. So we'll click the foreign key button, and we get asked if we want to create it, and we'll choose yes. And now we've been displayed this create foreign key screen. So what we'll do is key in some short text. And we get the option of 2 fields. Now these 2 fields are the 2 key fields from the TCURC currency table and from our table. We do have the option of ensuring that this foreign key matches both fields, so that when we allow the user to select an entry, the records that are returned will only be valid for the client that we are working in. But in our case, we won't choose this client field to be part of the key. We'll just choose our WAERS field. So all we're going to do is click this generic option, and we can wipe out these just for clarity. So then this foreign key will just use our currency field matching the WAERS field in the TCUR table. All we need to do is click on copy, and now our foreign key has been created. So let's activate our table, and let's go and have a look at the data. You can see our last record there, number 04. And when I place my cursor on the currency key field, I can press the F4 key, and now we're displayed with a drop-down box of all valid entries that can go in there. Now we have just chosen to display the data in our table. Therefore, we've got no entry box here, it's only display only. But the drop-down still works to show us the valid values. If we went back to create a record or change a record, let's choose change. Now when we go to the currency key field, we can see that we have the drop down button that's appeared. We can click it and choose an appropriate currency. So let's go down and choose US dollar, and we can see it brings the value back, and we can click save. So our currency key has been saved in US dollars. Let's go back. So we've taken a look at foreign keys. Now what I want to do is discuss what's called append structures. Now in our last example, we added some fields to our table. We also have the option of using append structures to add additional fields. And this is the preferred method for maintaining SAP delivered tables, and quite often extending your own customer-specific tables. Why would we use append structures rather than just adding fields to our table? Well, if it's a standard SAP table and we add fields to it, what if SAP release a new version of the software where they add some fields themselves? Well, when we come to do an upgrade, we're going to have some serious difficulties. Because we could have added fields to the table and we try to apply the update, we could end up with some serious errors. Our fields could get overwritten by those new fields that SAP have added. You never want to be in that situation. So to ensure you don't come up against this problem, this is where append structures are a great help. Append structures give us a safe way to enhance our tables and standard SAP tables. When we use append structures, the existing table remains unchanged, which removes any risk of our changes being overwritten. And quite often in an SAP system, you will see a table having multiple append structures applied to it because there have been different development needs as time has gone by and people want to add more fields to the underlying standard SAP table. So let's have a look at append structures, how we create them and how they are used. So as you can see, we are already in transaction SE11 with our table loaded. And what we need to do is use our mouse and go to the append structure button. We'll give it a click and the system is automatically suggesting a name for us. And notice it's automatically telling us to use our customer namespace, making sure our append structure starts with the letter Z. Let's accept this choice by the system. And now we're displayed with what looks like an empty table structure. So let's go ahead and fill it in just like we would with a normal table. Extra fields for employees. And when we come down to the body of the screen, notice this field now is called component. And this is just where we create our new fields. But one thing to keep in mind, it would be nice to differentiate our customer fields in our table from our new custom components in our append structure. So the best way to do this is still stay with the customer namespace, but where we use Z and the field name, let's use ZZ. And what we'll do is create a department field. And same thing with component type. Use ZZ, or choose yes to create. It's just asking us to save the append structure, which we will do. It's asking us what type of object we want to create, and it's a data element. And let's choose, should we have a code or description? Well, let's choose a 10-character code. Let's say, copy this, choose a field label, and activate the data element. That's active, so I'll step back. Now we're back to our append structure. It's brought through the properties of the data element and we can activate it. So let's step back and it should take us back to our table. And now we have an extra row that shows the actual append structure we've just created. If we want to go back to it, you just double click the append structure. So that's a very easy way to add additional fields to our tables and standard SAP tables without affecting the structure of the table itself. Now let's take a look at the data within our table and have a look at what field the append structure has added. If we scroll to the right, you'll see our brand new department field has been added as though it's just a normal field in our table, and we can enter data into the field just like any other field. The next thing we want to look at are include structures. Now, include structures are very similar to append structures, but the main difference is that include structures are reusable objects and can be linked to many other tables, ABAP programs, dialog programs, and structures. There are a few things you need to keep in mind though with include structures, and that is include structures must be flat structures, meaning they cannot contain any additional structures within them. And the fields within an include structure can have a maximum length of 16 characters. Let's dive straight in and see how we can create include structures that get attached to our employee table. So whereas we had an append structure button that we use for append structures, we don't have an include structure button. So the first thing we need to do is make sure we are in change mode. Oh, one little thing, I don't know if you noticed, because we're in display mode here, when we appended our append structure from the previous video, all we saw was this one append line. We didn't see the actual field within the append structure. This is some quirk within SAP that when you're in display mode you can see the field, but when you switch back to change mode it disappears. Don't ask me the logic, I don't know why. So anyway, what we want to do is create our include, and before we do it, just a quick note that it's important where you place your cursor when we do this, because wherever you place your cursor on your table, the include will be inserted one row above. So if we add our cursor here on surname, the include would be between surname and the employee field. So why is that important? Well, if you wanted your include structure to be part of the table key, you have to make sure it appears at the top of the table, because all table fields used as a table key need to be grouped together at the top of your table. But in our case, let's just insert it above our append structure. So I'm going to place my cursor on the append structure row, then go to the edit menu, and then include insert. And remembering to use our customer namespace, we use Z, and we'll call this ZEMPL for good luck. Click the green continue tick, and then we get a warning message just saying it's not active. Well, we know that because we're just creating it. And the green tick again, and then we can see your include structure has been inserted between the append and the eCurrency field. So now let's go out of field to our include structure. Let's just double click it, use forward navigation, we'll choose yes to save our table, yes to create the structure, and then we have a screen very similar to the append structure. So just like before, let's key in a short text. And then we'll create individual fields. Let's just create one field. Let's call this location. Oh, I forgot. Remember customer namespace, and we'll use ZZ to indicate it's not part of our original table. And we'll use zlocat for the component, and we'll use the forward navigation to create the data element. And again, we'll keep it very simple. We'll choose a 10 character field. So there we have our field added to the include. Let's activate the include. Then step back to our table. And there we can see our include is sat there just above the append structure. Our table is inactive. So once again, activate our table. And now we're good to go. We can use it however we wish. So let's just view the table, view the contents, and hopefully we'll see the additional field, here we go, inserted before the field in our append structure. And as you can see, it looks just like any other field and can be treated as so. So what we'll do, let's edit a few records just so we got some data in there. Department IT, of course. Save the record. Another one. Paris, this time HR department. Oh, I did say I was going to use codes, didn't I? Never mind, let's stick with this. As long as we keep it below 10 characters, we'll be fine. So if we scroll along, there we can see the data has been added to each record. And if I flip back and just go to display mode, sorry, come back out, and then go into display. There we can see the fields in a different color. Location, which is part of the include, and department, part of the append structure. And as I've just done that, I've just remembered one thing. I told you that there's this anomaly with the fields for the include and the append not displaying in change view. I seem to remember if you click on the row with your include and then come up to the expand include button, there we go, it shows it. Shows you how long it is since I've I've used that. And the same with the append structure. Still, it's a little strange why they don't expand them by default, but there we go. Now I want to discuss key fields in a little more detail. If we want to add fields or take fields away that are key fields, then we need to take into consideration exactly what will be going on in the database itself. Up to now, we have added fields to the table, included append structures and include structures, but the system actually applies these changes to the ABAP dictionary, not the underlying database. When we adjust any key fields, the system has to apply changes to the underlying database itself. Now you need to think about this. If you've got data in your table and you're changing key fields, who knows what effect it can have? If you're introducing a new key field, then it probably won't have a massive effect. It'll probably still allow you to add the field, activate it, so you can go in and add new data to the new field, ensuring that your records stay unique. If you try and change a field from being a key field to not a key field, then you need to put your thinking cap on. Because if you've got lots of data in the underlying database, by taking away a key field, it could mean that you introduce duplicate records into your table. Because now your table key is not as unique as before, you could end up with some undesired effects, such as corrupt data or records being deleted from your table. Let's dive in and have a look at how we can introduce new fields and take fields away, change fields, and that sort of thing. So you can see we've got the employees table here that we've been working with. And what we will do is turn our surname field into a key field. And it's quite simple. We just click the little tick to say it's a key field. And we might as well click the initial values field as well. And then we just need to activate. It's activated fine. We can view our data. And now you see the change in color for surname, indicating it's a key field. All our records are still the same. We know they're unique. So nothing much has happened. But now, let's take away this key field. We'll still keep it in the table, but we'll say it's not part of the key. Now the system doesn't know what records are in the table right now. So when we try to activate it, we should get some error messages warning us that, hey, you're removing a field that was part of the key, and you could have some, undesired effects happening to the data. So we'll activate, and true enough, we got an error message indicating that the old key had surname in it, but now it doesn't. And this is not just a warning. It's an error. It's telling us, no, I'm not going to activate the table for you because you may lose some data. So how do we get around this? We know that the data in our table is actually going to be okay. So we want to allow this, but the tool's saying we can't. Well, that's where we need to open up a different transaction. So we can either open up a new session or go direct to the transaction we want, which is SE14, from this screen. Let's do that. Utilities, and then choose Database Utility. When this screen appears, just keep in mind that in a production environment, you may be dealing with a table with millions of records, and you wouldn't want to execute this transaction on a table of that size with a processing type of direct, which means it's going to run while your screen is present right now. It'd be best to run this program in the background. But for us, we know our table's super small, so we can just run the process in the foreground and it should get done within seconds. So all we need to do is click the Activate and Adjust Database with Save Data. Request Adjust, we'll choose Yes. And there we can see it's run successfully. So now if we step back, our table has now been activated. We can view our data and our surname field is back to how it was before we made it a key field. So that's it for key fields really. There's just one more thing I forgot to mention, and that's these buttons up here. If you did want to insert a new field as part of your table key, then you need to be able to adjust the location of the fields on this screen. So let's say we wanted to insert a new field above the surname field. We would highlight the surname field and then choose the Insert button. Moves everything down one and we can add our new field. I'll remove it. Let's say we wanted to move title as part of the key. We can highlight it. Then we have the Cut, Copy and Paste buttons up here. So I could choose Cut and then Paste. You get the idea. And that's it for table keys. But just so I don't screw this table up, let me exit out without saving. And I'll go back in just to make sure everything's good. Yeah, it's back how it was, all active. Let's now take a look at deleting fields from your table. It doesn't happen very often, but there may be instances where you need to remove a field from a table. And when you do this, you must take special care because you run the risk of losing data. So first of all, we've been looking at key fields. So if we start with those, then you'll probably know that if we remove a key field from our table that contains data, it is more than likely you'll end up losing records. Because the fields that make up your table key make each record unique. Taking away a field from the key can result in non-unique records. So once the table is adjusted, some records will be deleted. SAP systems are very, very large systems, and tables are used all over the system for various needs. We've already seen how we can use the currency check table to bring up a list of values that we use to enter data into our employees table. Well, if that table was removed, then our drop-down would no longer work, and it would highly likely inactivate our table, because our table uses components of that currency table. So whenever you're working with a table and you're thinking of deleting fields, keep in mind, ask yourself some questions. Is this table being used as a check table for some other tables in the system? And if so, how is it going to affect those tables? Now, if you do try and delete fields from your table that are being used elsewhere in the system, your SAP system itself should stop you from actually making the deletion, or at least give you a warning. But don't rely on that. Always check yourself. And one final thing to remember is that if you delete fields from your table, you need to remember to convert your table using the SE14 transaction, the table utilities, so that the data is adjusted and the table is made active. So let's go through an example of how we delete fields, and we will use the Z employees 2 table. So I will go into change mode, and first of all I'll just create a field. I will insert a field before this include, and let's call it Z Awesome. Don't worry, we're going to delete this one. And let's just use a data element that we've already set up. Let's use Z title. And press enter. You can see it brings across the title attributes. We'll activate the table. And then we'll go and enter some data. So let's start in the 10 number range. And I'm just going to key in any old gibberish here. And click save. So I'll come back out, then we'll just have a view of the table to make sure the record has been added successfully. And there it is, and we can see the data we entered into the record. That looks fine. So now to delete this, we'll click on the field, click the delete button, and then we will activate the table. So as you can see, the system is displaying an error, which we'll take a look at. It's telling us the table was not activated because we deleted the Z Awesome field. So as I said before, we have to go to transaction SE14 and adjust the table. And this will have the result of losing some data. So utilities, database utilities. We're going to process it in the foreground, and we will activate and adjust the database. That's done successfully. So back to the table, we will view our data. There's our record, and as we can see, our field has been removed and we have lost that data from that field. Now, let's see what happens when we delete a key field. And to do this, I'm going to duplicate this table just so that we don't affect the current one and don't lose all the records. So I will create a new table with the suffix of 3. It's new, so we need to activate it. And the table should be empty, which it is. You can also press this number of entries and it'll bring up a dialog box telling you there's no records. So let's go and enter some records. Oh, actually, I'm jumping the gun. Let's go add another field to the table key. So what we will do is make surname a key field. Go into change mode, make it a key field, activate, and remember we've got no records in the table now, so it's activated successfully with no problem. And now we will go and enter some records. Click save. And now, just to do this nice and quick, I'm just going to overwrite, keeping the same sort of data here. We will keep the surname Smith. I'll tell you what, let's do it this way. We will keep employee number 1, but because surname is part of the key, all we need to do is make this unique for us to have a unique record in the table. So we will create Smith 2 and leave everything else as it is. Then a new employee number with a 2 suffix, with the surname of Andrews, save. We'll make this, oops, that's right, I've done the same thing. We'll leave it as 2 and we'll do Andrews 2. Slightly different with a dash. And click save. So I'll come back out, then we'll view the data. So we have 4 records, Smith, Smith 2, Andrews, Andrews dash 2. And we can see our Smiths have the same employee number, and so do the Andrews. So now what we will do is remove the surname field, and we will see what effects that has on our data. Because by removing the surname field, the only unique key we have is the client and employee number, and that would leave us with duplicate records, which is not allowed. So back to the table. Let's delete the field. I will activate it and we should be shown some errors. And we can see the system is just telling us the table is not active because we have removed the surname field. So we will go to the utilities. And choose to activate and adjust the database. That's been done successfully. So now what do you think the effect is on the table? Let's have a look. So there you go. You can see the system has actually removed 2 of the records because we would have been left with duplicate records according to the table key. And the system has kept the first record that it encountered. The second record has been deleted. So just to summarize, be very, very careful when deleting fields, both because you can lose data and your table and fields could be used as reference fields and check tables for other database tables in your SAP system. Now we're going to take a look at deleting complete database tables themselves. I mentioned when we covered deleting fields that you don't often have to do that task. And when we talk about deleting tables, well, that's even more infrequent. But you may have this requirement, so let's go through it so we can understand the process. The first thing is you will only be allowed to delete your own customer specific tables. you will not be allowed to delete SAP delivered tables. Now, because we have just created this zEmployees 3 table, we will use this in our example for deleting the table. But before that, I just want to show you a technique for checking that everything is okay for you to delete the table and you will not affect other parts of the system. So what I'm going to do is go back to our zEmployees 1 table, because we have included this table in the ABAP programs we have created so far. So what I've done, I've keyed in zEmployees 1. I'll choose display. Oh, it looks like that's the wrong one. Must be zEmployees. There we go. I will step back. And now what I'm going to do is go to this button up here, the Where Used button. Now this is a really handy tool that you will become familiar with and you will use an awful lot whilst you are developing, testing and just reading ABAP programs. So if we click the button, the system then brings up a dialog box where we go through and choose the objects we want to look through. So what this is going to do is check all the different types of objects that we have in our system that we select for a reference to our table zEmployees. Now we know we have only used this table in a program before, but with other tables you may not have that background knowledge. So you may want to go through, have a look at objects such as structures, database tables, views and so on. And to execute it, just click the green tick. Get a little pop-up, where used include, fields to the table. We'll just choose yes. So the system's going away and checking all the different objects that we have selected to find references to our table. And there it's come back and it's shown us we have 2 programs that are using this table. So immediately we know that if we delete this table, these programs are going to become inactive. They're not going to work anymore. If you want to look at the specific code in the table, all you need to do is double click. So by double clicking on this entry, it's then showing the snippets of code in our program where the table is used. And we can see we have lots of selects and write statements. And once again, we can double click on any one of these lines and actually jump straight into the program. There we go, and it takes us to the exact location that we double clicked on. Program down here, exactly the same thing. We can double click and go have a look at the program. So this Where Used button is a very useful tool, and I suggest you get used to using it because it saves you an awful lot of time. Now if we try to delete this table now, the system will not let us do it because we have objects that are dependent on it. So what you would have to do is find those programs, take some course of action to either edit the code, take out references to the table, or remove the programs completely before you could then come back and delete this table. So what we will do is change the table name, and we'll use the zEmployees 3 table that we created in the previous videos, and we will choose to delete this table. As you can see, we're presented with a message box telling us that the table contains data. And we know this, but we just want to delete the table anyway. If you click the green tick button, we will be taken back to the previous screen and the table would not be deleted. But if you click the little trash can, the table will get deleted. And there we have the confirmation message at the bottom saying the table was removed. If we try and display it, we can see it does not exist. Now one final note is that now we've deleted the table, we cannot undo this process. The table has gone completely. So before you click that trash can button, make sure you do want to delete the table.